This video is brought to you by Dr. Kristen R. Bromley's Guitar Method Book Series and Online Music Academy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kristen Bromley. Welcome to my online academy. It's so great to have you joining me here in these online lessons. It's a Theory Thursday. I love music theory, don't you? Now, in this lesson, we're going to look at some chord progressions for minor keys. In the last lesson, we looked at different scales, different modes of the minor key, and how the various chords come right on out of those modes that give us the chords for a progression in a given key. So now we're going to look at more of the application side of that and just get into those actual chord progressions and the ones that we use kind of commonly, and just open your eyes to things you could use for composing or just so you can recognize what's happening when you're playing a song, that sort of thing. So let's just go ahead and dive right in here. Now, I'm not going to review what I did in the last lesson, but I am going to go through just kind of the chords of a given key. We're going to use the key of A minor as our example. We used A minor in the last lesson, which we know has no sharps or flats naturally, though we can have some influence from an F sharp and a G sharp in this particular key, which I explained in the last lesson. And then that relates to the key of C major, because the key of C major also has no sharps or flats. So we'll just take a look here. Our tonic chord, and I explained this sort of thing a couple lessons ago when we were looking at the major keys. So our home chord is A minor. That's our one chord for the key of A minor. Our supertonic, or our two chord, is naturally a B diminished. However, when we bring in some of those other modes, as we talked about, we could alternatively have a B minor instead. So that could substitute for our B diminished, which can happen or could happen when you want to write a song. Our mediant, or our three chord, is C major. Our four chord, our subdominant chord, is typically minor. However, again, with those other modes, as I explained in the last lesson, we could alternatively replace that with a D major, and we sometimes see that in music that we play. The dominant chord is going to be a 5 or a 5/7 typically. However, naturally it sort of is E minor, and sometimes there will be songs where we see a 5 that is a minor chord. Doesn't have the same pull as like our dominant functioning chords do in the major key, and which the E or the E7 will, but it does have that option there, and sometimes we do use that one. So E minor is a possibility, or E or E7. And then we have the submediant. Now with the submediant, that's our sixth chord, and it's an F, although we could have a sharp sixth chord and get that F sharp diminished. Highly rare to actually bring that in, but it is an option that does exist. But usually we're just using the F major chord there. And then our subtonic. Now, when we did these with the major key, we talked about a leading tone. The leading tone is a half step below the root. And so when we do this sharp, meaning we raise that 7 chord up and use G sharp diminished, that's actually our leading tone chord of this key if we were to use that one. But when we're using the natural 7, the G natural in this key, it's a subtonic chord, and we can have that as a G or a G7. Interestingly enough, these two function in a dominant way. So they're dominant functioning even though they're coming off that subtonic or leading tone, and our dominant is off step 5. So those are the chords that we have in this particular key and just in general. Now, lots of times when we're playing in minor keys, we use the 1 chord, the 5 chord, the 1 chord, and the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. Those are the most typical ones, but we do bring in some of these other sounds, which is super fun. And then depending on the style we're playing, like jazz, a lot of times you'll actually get the 2 to a 5 to a 1, but those things get a little bit different than what we're doing in pop, and so that'll be explained later on in another lesson. Here we're just looking at sort of our general chord progressions. So I have some examples up here on the board. These are not exhaustive by any means, but there's some typical things and sort of introduce us to a few ideas and a few of these sounds. You could play around with this sort of thing as much as you want to and just start recognizing things when you're playing in a minor key. So right up there at the top, just the 1 minor to the 5 to the 1 minor. So A minor to E to A minor. I'm just going to demonstrate these, giving each one measure. Of course, in a song, you may see things where things last much longer. And these are pieces. You might have a chord progression that does a lot of these different things all together for the whole song. I'm just showing some of the common movements here. So we have A minor to Now there really isn't room on the board, but of course that 5 could be a 5-7, so A minor to E7 to A minor. Or we could even have the E minor there, so A minor to E minor to A minor. Just like that. So that's common. Now we also a lot of times will do the 1-4-5-1 kind of movement. So if I had A minor to D minor to E back to A minor. Or alternatively I could use E7, so A minor to D minor to E7 back to A minor. And you might even run into where you're using the E minor, so you have ready and A minor to D minor to E minor back to A minor. So just like that. Now if we go on to the next one, we got that 1 minor to a 5 to a 4 minor to a 1. So that 1-5-4-1 movement doesn't happen, say, in classical music too traditionally, but in pop music or rock, jazz, some of these places, blues, sometimes we break these rules. So we might hear this sound too. So I'd have A minor to E to D minor back to A minor. Of course, that 5 chord could be E7, so A minor, E7, D minor, back to A minor. And we could even use the E minor, so A minor to E minor to D minor, back to A minor. Kinda cool. So typical things. So many of our songs use a 1, 4, and 5 chord the majority of the time. Some of these other sounds get used though here and there. So that subtonic sound, that one off the flat 7, so in this case the 7 that's part of the A natural minor scale instead of the G sharp, something off G sharp which comes off that leading tone, which could come out of the melodic minor or the harmonic minor scales. With that, we can have that sort of as our dominant functioning return home. A couple lessons ago I talked about how a lot of times we have this one chord, it's the home chord, it's where we're starting, it's where we're comfortable. We use these other chords to go away, create tension, and come back. But our big climax and the big cadence usually happens through the 5 chord. However, when we start getting this subtonic sound, we can also use it in place of the dominant chord to sort of do the same sort of climax, cadential return home kind of thing. So 1-4-7-1. So 1, 2, we'd have the A minor to D minor to G major back to A minor. Which is kind of cool. That one could also be done as G7. So we'd have ready and A minor, D minor, G7, A minor. So that's kind of fun there. Now, I'm going to bring in some of these other sounds, like our 3 that's a major, our 6 that's a major, and then our 7 and 1. So we've got the A minor to the C major, to the F major, to the G major, back to A minor. Gives us some of these sounds from these major chords that we can bring in, which are kind of cool. So you got 1, 2, we'd have the A minor to C, to F, to G, back to A minor. I'm going to put G7 now in place of the G. So 1, 2, ready, and A minor, C, F, G7, back to that A minor. Since that 7 chord is our dominant functioning chord, I'm actually going to play that again with E in place of G. So E in place of G. So you have 1, 2, ready. We'd have the A minor, C, F, and A minor. You could use E7 instead. You'd have 1, 2, ready. We'd have A minor, C, F, G7, back to A minor. So there is sort of an introduction. I didn't really use the F sharp diminished or the G sharp diminished. The F sharp diminished would be really rare, but it's an option there. G sharp diminished, I didn't use that. I do want to go back though and play just a little bit here as a substitution with that D chord as a major option instead of the minor. So with the 1, 4, 5, 1, I'm just going to demonstrate it there, where we've got A minor to D minor, D minor to the E, and to the A minor. So I'd have 1, 2, ready, I'd have A minor, and now I'll do it with an E7. So A minor, E7, back to A minor. Kind of fun. I didn't do it up here on the board, but if we went 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, which is a classic kind of thing to do. So I'm going to insert a 1, 4, 1 before I do the 1, 5, 1. Up there, we would have, so I'm going to go 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, just kind of go back and forth to that 1. We could have A minor, D minor, A minor, back to A minor. Now I'm going to do it with the dominant 7th, so I'd have that 1, 4, 1, 5, 7, and 1. Now we'll look at that with the major 4 chords, so it's a D major instead of the minor. So I have A minor, A minor, and A minor. And I could throw the E7 on there. So you got 2, ready, and A minor, D, A minor, E7, A minor. Throw that in there because it's pretty classic. Now, sometimes in jazz, sometimes even in pop music, folk music, and so on, we will get that diminished chord in there a little bit as well. So if I go 1, 4, and then instead of 5, 1, I could come to that diminished and back to the minor. So I'd have G sharp diminished here. Try to find, it's harder to find in first position a great way to play that chord, but I'm just going to play it here for us. So if we had A minor to the D minor, we could have that G sharp diminished and back to A minor. So it is an option that we have there. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I hope it is super fun, opens ideas for songwriting, helps us understand the music we're playing more, and even when we're working on things by ear, it can help us find things just to theoretically go through some of the options when we can't quite find what the thing that we're hearing is. So we've got that. Now in the next Theory Thursday lesson, we're going to look at substitutions. We'll go back to that major key and look at how we can borrow some of these things into the major key, and also other types of things that sometimes get brought in just a little bit. So it gives us an underlying understanding of the harmony as we progress forward on these Theory Thursdays. So hope you're having fun. We got lots of lessons on the channel, things that have already been released and things coming out fresh right now, Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. We got jazz lessons, technique Tuesdays, Theory Thursdays, and various things happening on Saturdays. So hope you're having fun. Take care, keep at it, and we'll see you again. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. For more in-depth lessons and to progress through a free guitar course, check out my Guitar 101 series on YouTube and my guitar method books, which all come with access to hours of in-depth video lessons. You can find more information about me and my products at KristenBromley.com. Take care.